So we've got the Dallas Cowboys. Their needs are the guard position, tight end, defensive line, safety, and a linebacker. Those are their top 5 needs. They probably have more than that. There's actually been, this is a good team to start with because there's been a lot of news regarding the Dallas Cowboys today and over the last couple of days. So with the Dallas Cowboys, there's been news about, okay, Michael Gallup could stay now, and Amari Cooper could be the one to leave this free agency. There has been talk that they might cut and release Amari Cooper, and there's been talk of extensions or an extension with Michael Gallup. So that completely changes the game here for the Dallas Cowboys. I think right off the top, you do not see a team need, or you do see tight end. I was going to say you do not see it, but tight end is on the list. And a lot of that has to do with whether or not they retain Dalton Schultz. And I think what Dallas is thinking here is that they would rather have Michael Gallup at his contract, at his price, than Amari Cooper at his price. And they would rather, have Dalton Schultz and Michael Gallup than just Amari Cooper, because it feels like Dallas wants to be able to ensure that they can keep Dalton Schultz. And I agree with that. I would rather have Michael Gallup and Dalton Schultz than just Amari Cooper. And I do feel like last season, Amari Cooper started to get phased out of the primary playmakers, of the guys that were touching the ball the most last season. He became more of like a kind of, what's the word? Like a spark in the offense, a big play threat in the offense, but not necessarily a consistent threat in the offense. And that's something that I feel like is concerning if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan. If you want to keep Amari Cooper, I just don't think he's worth the amount of money that they've invested into him currently. I like Amari Cooper as a player. I think he's fantastic. I think he does a lot of things well. I think he's a great route runner. I think he has great chemistry with Dak Prescott. I think he's electric. I think he's fast. He's quick. Gets in and out of his breaks extremely well, and is good down the field. I think he fits this offense. I think he fits Dak Prescott. But at his current price, he might be one of the more overpaid receivers in the NFL, given his actual impact on this team in terms of wins and losses, right? He produces, but a lot of the times he's not the guy that you look to on third down to move the chains. He's not the guy that you look to on a big play. And continuously, we've kind of seen with Amari Cooper that he doesn't come to play in the biggest of games, especially on the road. We've seen many times. So for Dak Prescott, I think retaining Dalton Schultz, his chain mover, his reliable target over the middle of the field, and then also having Michael Gallup to complement CeeDee Lamb, where Michael Gallup's more that perimeter target, CeeDee Lamb's more that slot target. That would be the way to go if you could keep that structure. Now, the guy that's really hurting all of this is Ezekiel Elliott. And if they could somehow move off of Ezekiel Elliott, move Zeke's contract elsewhere, that would be ideal. I'm not sure they're going to be able to do that. I don't think they're going to do that. But if I was the Cowboys, I would have never signed Zeke to the contract that they did. But if they can somehow move Zeke, that would be perfect. At least going into next year, you've got to consider using Tony Pollard more, okay? Because Tony Pollard is certainly a guy that I feel needs to be getting the ball more. And that's going to be interesting whenever his whole situation comes up. But taking a look at the Dallas Cowboys and their depth chart, I feel like the guard position is a need because of Conor Williams. Conor Williams is a free agent, not Zach Martin, as somebody asked. Tyler World says, how do they need a guard? They've got Zach Martin. Well, there's 2 guards that start in the NFL on every team. So just because you have one guard doesn't mean you have both, Tyler's World. So when you look at their offensive line, Tyron Smith, left tackle, who's getting older, you might have to consider at some point getting younger at that position, but he's still there. And we've seen tackles play for, a long period of time and be able to sustain success. The problem with Tyron Smith is his age and his injury history are 2 things that don't work for me. But you have to make sure, like you did last offseason, bring in a quality backup swing tackle for when Tyron Smith or La'el Collins go down, that you can place that guy into the starting lineup, because just the history of Tyron Smith and Collins, that you will need that swing tackle at some point in time. You will need to have that third tackle. So the third tackle is very important, whoever that is going to be. I'm not sure if they think that's Steele or somebody else. But the left guard position, back to Conor Williams. Personally, I would let him walk. I think he's a little bit overrated. From a grading perspective, Conor Williams is graded well from PFF and all that sort of stuff. But I do think that you could go elsewhere, cheaper at this position, maybe younger, go in the draft and draft somebody. And I don't think that the production of the offensive line would be all that different. I think Conor Williams has been picked on in pass protection in the past. And I would let somebody else overpay for him personally. Center is still a concern for me, although they have, still that locked down. It's not like that's a need necessarily. But the offensive line is still quality. It's not the top unit in the league like it used to be. And then figuring out Dalton Schultz and Michael Gallup is kind of the next thing on the list for the offense. And like I said, I would rather have Michael Gallup and Dalton Schultz than Amari Cooper. But I would rather have Amari Cooper than Zeke. So, I mean, the first idea would be to move off of Zeke if you could. I don't think that's going to happen, so it looks like they're going to have to maybe move on from Amari Cooper. I think you could trade him to somebody and get some assets back to use maybe on your defense or your offensive line, like I said, because I think Amari has some value. He's a top 20 receiver, if not more, better than that, top 15. So you could get something off of him. Defensively, I think this defense looks a lot better than it did a year ago when it comes to young talent, when it comes to the future, and I think that's awesome. Obviously, Dan Quinn had an influence on that, absolutely. I feel like with Micah Parsons there, and you've got Diggs at corner, those are two foundational pieces for your defensive line, because I think Parsons is better off playing a majority on the defensive line. And then you've got the linebacking core, which you could put him at linebacker. He's going to play a little bit of linebacker. He's going to play a little bit of defensive end, I think, just depending on the down and the distance and the formation and all that sort of stuff. DeMarcus Lawrence is a very good piece, still a very good player. Honestly, maybe underrated at this point because everyone thought he was overrated, and now the spectrum's kind of changed. The middle of your defense could use some work. The defensive tackle position. You did spend a third-round pick on it last year and a third-round pick on it the year before with Neville Gallimore, who I believe was hurt last year. Carlos Watkins is a free agent. I would look to maybe add some beef to the interior defensive line or add somebody, maybe that could be even a pick early in the draft that you could look to just completely dominate the defensive line, because that's really what you're missing. Randy Gregory, you could honestly Gregory's probably going to get a big chunk of change, so he's probably going to leave. So to replace his presence, maybe you play Parsons more at D end with Lawrence at D end, and then you look to replace Gregory with more of an interior presence and an interior force rather than an edge force. Doris Armstrong is somebody that I would like to keep if I'm the Cowboys as a nice depth piece. Terrell Basham is a very underrated depth piece as well. And you also have Chauncey Golston as well, who you drafted in the third round, who could come in as a depth piece. So I think your edge position is good. I do think you need to improve your interior position. The linebacker position is definitely going to be something that to watch. Jabril Cox was a nice find in the fourth round. And like I said, Parsons will play some linebacker. But I do think that you should be looking to add a linebacker. Maybe you re-sign Keanu Neal. Both him and Van Der Esch are linebackers that are free agents. I think Van Der Esch can go. I don't think really he's not really played a ton of reps for you over the last 2 to 3 years. He did play better last year. I would rather keep somebody like Keanu Neal, who might be better off in coverage, and then you've got a guy like Cox to play in the run game. But maybe you look for the typical Dan Quinn type linebackers, or maybe a veteran presence like somebody like KJ Wright to fill that spot. But when you really look at, or you could go young, really when you look at the defense, it's a lot more about retaining players for me than it is about adding. You could definitely look to add to your safety position, specifically free safety. I think you want to keep Jaron Kearse if you can at strong safety. He was fantastic, very underrated. Malik Hooker will probably be gone and get a better contract elsewhere. DeMonte KZ could come back, maybe not. Don't know. Donovan Wilson's decent as well, but getting a younger or playmaking free safety might be the way to go if you're going to spend money in free agency. That might be the position that they really look towards. What's going on, Cryptic Ninja, Don Burr, Jake? Thank you guys for joining. What's up? The free safety position, we've got guys like Marcus Williams, Marcus May. These players would be excellent fits for this defense, and I do feel like would be perfect additions. Even a lower tier name like Anthony Harris or maybe even Jaqueski Tart, although he's more of a strong safety type. I feel like those guys would work for this defense. Quandre Diggs would be an awesome addition to this defense. But I definitely would look at adding a safety. If I was to spend any sort of money on the defense to make one position better, it would be the safety position, because I think everything else is pretty good, and you could probably fill your interior defensive line through the draft or just with cheaper free agents. You know, some interior defensive linemen. Let's check for you here. Defensive tackle. DJ Jones is a guy that I love. I think he'd fit this defense very well, playing in a similar scheme with the 49ers last season. Taking a while for it to load up, so I'm just going to skip that. But corner position, you would like to upgrade from Anthony Brown. You did spend a second-round pick on Joseph a year ago. Hopefully he takes a step up. Not sure on his progress. The team knows that better than I do. Trevon Diggs is going to be your number one. Jordan Lewis is your nickel. He's solid. You could look to add maybe a veteran. Maybe a veteran like an Xavier Rhodes. If you want more of a man-to-man guy, maybe you go with a cheaper option like Mike Hughes from the Chiefs. So that's kind of how I see the Dallas Cowboys. I think a couple cheaper options. Maybe you go with cheaper veterans at defensive tackle, cornerback, spend a little bit of money at free safety, retain Kearse at strong safety, let Gregory walk, retain Keanu Neal if you can, let Conor Williams walk, pay Michael Gallup. I'm not sure what you're going to do with Amari Cooper. Pay Dalton Schultz. Make sure you have a quality swing tackle, and then just work on the draft. The Cowboys are very good at drafting, and that's something that they use to their advantage to fill in their needs every season. So get a little bit bigger up front in the interior, hopefully add a little bit to the secondary, and the Cowboys should be good to go. They're a contender in the NFC. I really like the way they're structured. They have, some young foundational pieces, quarterback, wide receiver, defensively up front and in the secondary. So the Cowboys are looking real good for the future. This is a definite offseason for them to have a little bit of a swing because they're in a tough cap position. So they're going to have to make some tricky moves. But if they pull it off, they're going to be in a good spot. So that's the Dallas Cowboys. Let's get some water here real quick. As Jake says, please hit that like button, guys. It really, really helps people find this video. And if you do enjoy what I'm doing here, and if you do enjoy the content, please do Gronk spike that like button. And anything you can do to help the channel, share this to your friends. Join the Discord, man. That's great. We get every notification to the Discord. I really want to make it a priority this year, to get that Discord community built up. I feel like that is a real strength so far for the channel, and I think it's a great community. So if you guys want to be a bigger part of the community, check out the Discord. Link is in the description. Let's get to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are next. So we've got the Eagles, and they have some money here. The Eagles are probably one of the more interesting teams in free agency due to the fact of the amount of draft picks they have to utilize in the draft and how that might also help them build their roster and then also use for trade bait. So the Philadelphia Eagles could be a team that actually go out there, be aggressive, and trade for their needs if they want to. No, Don, I have not done the Lions yet. I am just starting here with the NFC East, and we are on our second team of the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles, their needs right there, as you see, safety, corner, wide receiver, guard, linebacker. There are more as well, but these are just my personal picks. So let's start on offense. Wide receiver, you need a number 2, and I would argue you need a number 3. I look at this depth chart, I don't see anything past Devontae Smith. I think Jalen Reagor has been an utter disappointment, and Eagles fans might disagree with me here. I don't think he's a very good football player. He does not separate from man-to-man coverage. He does not make people miss in the open field. He does have speed. That's about it. I don't think he's very good. That's just my opinion. Devontae Smith is good. I think he'll even get better this year. He's very young, and he's just developing really into his body as an NFL receiver. I think he's going to be a top 10 receiver, top 15 receiver within the next couple of years. Quez Watkins, I like as a niche player. I think he's good to stretch the field. You get him in the screen game a little bit. That's totally cool. He works for their current offense, but he's more of like a number 4 to me on a normal team. So you need to look to add to the wide receiver position. Whether that's trading for somebody, maybe you trade for a guy like Brandon Cooks. If you want to take that step, Brandon Cooks has fit every single system he's ever played in. The Texans would like to trade him, I believe. And you could probably get him for a 3rd-round pick. You know, if you want to get a nice number 2 who's got speed, you guys like speed at the position, he would fit, I feel like. But if you want to go through free agency, you could try to target somebody with bigger money like Chris Godwin, who's an excellent football player and would probably fit that slot position to give a reliable option over the middle of the field for Jalen Hurts or whoever the quarterback's going to be in the future. And then you've also got guys like Allen Robinson. I don't think Odell would probably go there, but there's other guys as well who Mike Williams could be a target for you. I don't know if he'd necessarily work well with Jalen Hurts. Maybe he would, actually, because he is kind of a jump ball guy, and they don't really have that big-bodied presence for this receiving core. So maybe, like, I look at a receiving core as a basketball team. I feel like a basketball team, you know, you want the power forward, you want the shooting guard, you want the point guard, and it just feels like they don't have a lot of size. So maybe adding that big receiver could help as well. I know that they kind of prefer speed at this point in time, but that's the way that I look at it. So wide receiver positions, you could target through the draft as well. I mean, but they haven't been very good at drafting receivers lately. So that's something to consider. Juju would be a nice add, I feel like, and he wouldn't have to travel very far to play for the Eagles. He's in Pittsburgh. You've also got guys like I said, Mike Williams. Even like a lower key name like Zay Jones would add a little bit of size to your receiving core, and he wouldn't cost a lot. Same thing for Rashard Higgins. Who else? You've got Isaiah McKenzie is fast. DJ Chark is fast, could stretch the field for you. There's a lot of options here, and even maybe a shot at a guy like Laquan Treadwell, who actually came on at the end of last year for Jacksonville. So there's a lot of receivers and different tiers, some really good, some, you know, kind of, you know, go for it, shots in the dark types. Offensive line is one of the better ones in football, in my opinion. Now, I messed up in the last video where I said that Brooks was coming back. He's actually retiring, which I forgot about. That is a huge loss. Obviously, he's been hurt the last couple of years, though. Now, you did find a left tackle, which is nice. I'm not sure what they're going to do with Andre Dillard now that he's just basically a first-round pick as a backup. I'm not sure if they're going to move him to guard, if they're going to try to trade him, what they're going to try to do. They're just going to keep him on the roster as their swing tackle. But you still got Lane Johnson, at least for one more year. Jason Kelce contemplating retirement, but he's going to probably come back for one more season, so that's good at center. And Landon Dickerson can play guard for you for one more year until Kelce eventually retires and then probably move to center. So what I would be looking to do is trying to find a guard, probably nobody that's like super expensive. Through free agency, I'd probably be looking for more of the short-term solutions, you know, and obviously with the Eagles, they like guys that more so are, they kind of like all shapes and sizes, but they definitely like athletes at the guard position. And I would view some guys like Glowinski from the Colts might not be a bad, not super expensive type of guy. Who else? You've got, maybe you take a shot at Duvernay Tardif. He was a good player a couple of years ago, and he kind of took that time with the whole doctor situation. Andrew Norwell is older, but still a good player. They could look at, who else? James Daniels might be more expensive. Maybe Kyle Long. I don't know. Who else? Let's keep going through this list. Not a ton of options there, but I do feel like they could get a guard in free agency if they want, or they could draft another one. They've been good at drafting offensive linemen, so you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that they draft an offensive lineman and they sign a receiver. That might be the way to go, just based on your track record of doing both. Tight end, Dallas Goedert's there, and Richard Rodgers and company are the backups, and all signed, so that's good. Quarterback-wise, I made a whole video about Gardner Minshew. If you could trade Gardner Minshew for some assets, wide receiver, a third-round pick, let's say. Let's say you trade Gardner Minshew for a fourth or a third-round pick. You could utilize that pick on offensive line, wide receiver, defense, right? So maybe you trade Gardner Minshew to a quarterback-needy team, but Jalen Hurts is going to be there. And like I've said, I think you should build your team now for Jalen Hurts. And then if he's not the guy and not the answer, you can always get a quarterback last to finish off the process and then go for a Super Bowl. So I'd use these picks to trade for players or to use them in the draft to build your roster up and then build that young foundation for Hurts or for the next quarterback. Personally, I'm not 100% sold on Hurts. Some people are, some people aren't. Some people are totally not, and some people are totally. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I see some good things about him. I see some bad things about him. He definitely needs to improve as a passer. If he doesn't improve as a passer this season, I think he needs to go. That's my personal opinion. Miles Sanders is good. They could use a power back. You could probably get one through the draft. I don't think they're going to be spending, much on free agency through running back position. Defensive line, I think you're good in the interior. You don't need to do much there. The edge position, Derek Barnett's a free agent. Personally, I'd let him probably go unless you came cheap. Josh Sweat's a good player. I think Brandon Graham should be back. I don't think he's a free agent. He's good. So Brandon Graham, I'm not sure if he's still going to be the same player coming off the injury, but he'll be back. And then you've got Josh Sweat. So I'd have Sweat and Graham as your primary starter and then try to find that third option like you always do with a veteran, like you have in the past with Chris Long, like you did last year with Ryan Kerrigan. So I would be looking to add a pass rush pop, somebody like Jerry Hughes or somebody like Justin Houston, an older player that still got some rotation value. Somebody like that. Mario Addison is another example of that. This year's Ryan Kerrigan, basically. Or you could look to somebody maybe with some upside like Kamiko Ture, who's going to be very cheap. I don't think they need to spend a lot of money on this position yet. Maybe that's down the road, but not yet. Linebacker, they need to address, at least with one free agent. I think really where they should spend their money is safety. I think they should get one safety, especially with the amount of cover 2 they play. I think safety is valuable to them. So corner, not so much. You already have a big ticket item with Darius Slay. I'd be looking to maybe keep Steven Nelson. I don't know. But it would be nice to upgrade the nickel position from Avonte Maddox to somebody else. So maybe you go with you try to sign a Bryce Callahan or a Reed or somebody like that in free agency. Safety position, though, I think they're probably going to move on from both the safeties they had last year, which was Anthony Harris and Rodney McLeod. I think they're probably going to bring in a younger name, maybe a more high-profile name like Marcus May or like Marcus Williams. Who else? They could go with somebody like Justin Reed, too, a little bit cheaper but good. I don't know. Maddox is 4-year contract. I don't think he's personally very good. So yeah, Tyson thinks he's good. Eagles fan there. I mean, I don't think he's very good. So that's just my opinion. But I just because I think he's so one-dimensional. I think he's a good tackler and he's feisty and all that stuff. I don't think he's great. But I guess they could be looking for a perimeter corner then if they move on from Steven Nelson. So maybe they go with Joe Hayden. I think Joe Hayden would fit. Kyle Fuller, Xavier Rhodes, somebody like this. Maybe a Killa Witherspoon. Levi Wallace, somebody like that. Good zone player. Isaiah Oliver is an interesting name. But those guys make sense to me. I don't think they're going to go for J.C. Jackson. It wouldn't make sense because they don't play a lot of man coverage. It would be almost pointless to go after somebody of that profile. The linebacker position, I would look to add to. Alua Khan would be a guy that I think that's how you say his name, would be somebody that I would be maybe targeting, as well as Devondre Campbell, A.J. Johnson, Jayon Brown, Anthony Walker, all of these players. Maybe you add speed, like Quan Alexander isn't like a high-profile name, but he can run and he can cover. Those guys would make sense. Lower key names, Josie Jewell, Anthony Barr. Yeah, I would agree with that. Those guys make sense to me. Just a linebacker, one of them. They need one linebacker to sign. You can draft another one, but they need to sign somebody. So when I look at the big money acquisitions here, to simplify it, I think it's wide receiver. They should spend some money to get a receiver because I think they suck at drafting them. And then I would look to add a safety, probably for some bigger money, or a linebacker. I think you can spend less at linebacker nowadays, though, and get away with it. So I would spend more on safety, a lot on receiver, get those two things covered. Maybe draft offensive linemen, draft defensive line, as you always do. Corner, you could go cheap as well because corner's not huge in your scheme. So that's the way I see the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that they're very intriguing because they have so many options with what they can do. All right. The New York Giants are next. The New York Giants have a new regime. So for you Giants fans out there that maybe aren't quite understanding what the Giants are going to be. So clearly they've got Brian Daboll from the Buffalo Bills. Brian Daboll has spent time as a Bill, as a Patriot. He's from Alabama. He has a lot of, kind of Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick roots. And then on top of that, and Nick Saban as well. And then from the management perspective, their management is going to be from Buffalo. So there's going to be Buffalo-based thinking. So what I would expect is they kind of like Buffalo, spend money on wide receiver, spend money on quarterback, spend money on probably corner, coverage. And these are things that they already kind of have. So that's a plus. So that's maybe why they also took the job, which makes sense. But when you look at their biggest needs, they definitely need to reshape their whole offensive line. That's first and foremost. They need to reshape their offensive line. Now, I do think that the Giants were much more talented last year than they ever got credit for. Like, a lot of things went the wrong way. I thought their coaching was disastrous, and obviously losing Daniel Jones was bad. But I think this year is all about finding out what you really have in Daniel Jones, because we've seen flashes and we've seen things that are positive, but we haven't quite seen if he's going to be the guy for the future. Kind of like Jalen Hurts of the Eagles as well. And I think you have a very strong foundation on defense. Now, there's been talk that you might trade Saquon Barkley and James Bradberry. I think it would be a mistake to trade James Bradberry. I could understand trading Saquon, but I also wouldn't trade him for a 4th-round pick. Now, here's the thing with the Giants. I would keep Saquon for the last year on his rookie contract because that's a good deal, and then maybe move off of him. I love Saquon. He's one of my favorite players when he's healthy. But I would see what he can do in this offense, right? This is a new offense. This is Brian Daboll offense. And they, this is a guy that comes from New England and Buffalo. Like, they like to pass, and Saquon is a great receiver. So using him out of the backfield as a receiver, even if it doesn't mean he doesn't touch the ball as a runner as much, would be a great way to utilize him. I think they've got great pieces in Kadarius Toney in the slot that they could utilize in the Cole Beasley type fashion. You've got Kenny Golladay on the outside. You've got Darius Slayton with speed still there. John Ross, speed guy on the outside that could be utilized. So they've definitely got some players here. Sterling Shepard, I think, is a free agent. Let me just check. Is he not a free agent? I thought he was a free agent. It looks like he's not a free agent, which is interesting. I feel like they could trade him or something. He's getting a little bit older. I guess he's not a free agent. No, I don't see him here as a free agent. He was really good last year, actually. He's an underrated player. I don't see him here on the list. I thought he was a free agent. Maybe I'm just losing myself here. But yeah, regardless of that, I think you've got pieces at wide receiver, so you don't have to spend a lot on wide receiver. And the front office just completely destroyed this team from a management, from a cap perspective. Like Durkant's saying -$6 million. That's horrendous. Yeah. But they got to do a lot of work in terms of restructuring contracts and trading players, and that's why they've thrown out the idea of trading James Bradbury, trading Saquon Barkley because of this. The tight end position is probably not going to be a position that they really address because when you look at the Bills, they've kind of never really spent money on tight end. Dawson Knox is kind of their guy, and Dawson Knox is more of a move tight end. He doesn't block a ton, so maybe they want to bring back Evan Ingram. I feel like you move on from Evan Ingram and maybe find somebody that's got the same sort of skill set, but just like a different player. Like, let's just check tight end. So they could maybe go after somebody, like if they want to go cheaper veteran, maybe Jared Cook, somebody like that, similar skill set. They could go with, honestly, CJ Uzoma makes sense for this offense. Gerald Everett, a little bit more blocking upside there. Maybe you go with somebody like Mo Alley Cox, who kind of deserves more of a bigger role on a different team. I don't think they're going to spend a lot of money, though, on this position, and they might draft the position. Jacob Hollister makes some sense as he spent time in Buffalo, so maybe he'd have familiarity with the offense, but that's more of a low-key signing. So I don't think they're going to spend a ton on tight end, but it's really like OJ Howard. Like, a lot of people want OJ Howard on different teams, but quite clearly, guys, OJ Howard, I would not recommend to be a starting tight end at this point. Unless he makes a big turnaround in his game, he just hasn't been the same player since the injury. The offensive line, though, they need to try to, and the thing is, they can't really spend money if they don't have it. So they might have to look to the draft in multiple rounds to address the offensive line, because the only real answer they have here is Andrew Thomas at left tackle, who I think is a good player. Every other position could use an upgrade on the offensive line. You could bring in a backup running back who's cheaper behind Saquon to help him out. Defensively, I think they're good in the interior with Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence. They have lost some of the depth. Danny Shelton and Austin Johnson are both free agents. It would be nice to retain Austin Johnson, but I'm not sure how similar their defense is going to look. I believe Vic Fangio is now their defensive coordinator, so they still are going to maintain, those bigger bodies in the inside, and then they're going to try to build, from the back to the front. But I wouldn't be surprised either if they tried to get a linebacker, because Vic Fangio loves linebackers. So maybe somebody like Johnson would make sense, or somebody like Josie Jewell from the Broncos would make some sense to me. But I think they're good in the interior. They definitely need an edge rusher. If they're going to spend money this offseason, it's got to be on edge rusher. Like, if they're going to somehow sign somebody, it's got to be one of these edge rushers that can get to the quarterback, because they don't really have that. Ojulari was pretty good last year, the second-round pick. He looks promising, but they need a guy on the opposite side to help him out, and maybe a veteran in that regard. But their secondary is already pretty strong. They don't got to do much. James Bradbury, Xavier McKinney, Logan Ryan, Adoree Jackson, Julian Love, Aaron Robinson, all these guys are signed and good to go for next season. So I don't think you got to change much there. If you're going to spend money, edge rusher, linebacker, and obviously offensive line. But those are the major needs on their team. And I think this team is just going to be a lot better. Or Wink Martindale. I got Vic Fangio and Wink Martindale confused. But yeah, I think they're looking pretty good. And I feel like if they can figure out this cap situation, that's what it's going to be about this offseason. I think the coaching of having Wink Martindale on defense, having Brian Daboll on offense is going to be such a big deal for them. It's going to greatly improve them. Like, I can't even speak enough on how much that's going to improve their team. Jason Garrett as OC, dreadful. I like their DC from the past, but I think you even got an upgrade in that regard, and obviously an upgrade at head coach from Joe Judge to Brian Daboll. So if Daniel Jones could stay healthy, that's another thing. Maybe look for a backup quarterback, somebody that can play a little bit, and I have recommended Mitch Trubisky as that option. That's another player too. So I think this team is probably not going to be like a playoff team this year, but if they make the right moves, they can start to build a team that's going to be promising into the future, because they definitely have some pieces here together, and I think their defense is going to be good next year, and I think their offense has a lot of skill talent that Brian Daboll can take advantage of. So that's the Giants. If you guys have any questions about that, let me know. Offensive line, probably more so through the draft, and maybe you could spend a little bit of money on the defense up front, and that's where I'd spend in free agency. The Washington football team. All right, Washington football team, aka the Commanders now. I was just getting used to saying the football team too. Like, man. So, the offense. Terry McLaurin is your wide receiver 1. I'm not sure if they're in love with Brown, the 3rd-round pick from a year ago, as their other perimeter target. But what I would think is that the Washington football team, aka the Commanders, as I continue to say the football team, it's just too fun to not say it. Terry McLaurin on the outside, Brown on the other outside. You got Curtis Samuel probably more as the slot guy. So those are your 3 starting receivers. I don't think that's terrible. You know, you could maybe add another one, but even guys like Antonio Gandy Golden, they got a little bit of upside there. Maybe you re-sign Cam Sims. I think he's underrated. You could probably move on from Adam Humphries. I don't think that's a big deal at all. But the receiving position isn't bad. You know, it could be better. But I think you're fine there. The offensive line, Leno Jr. will be back. Eric Flowers is there, so that's cool. So you got the left side pretty much locked down. The problem is the right side with Brandon Scherf becoming a free agent. That's going to be a massive loss. I don't see him coming back, but at least you'll retain some money because of that, right? And you'll have some money to work with. So maybe you go with the cheaper alternative at that position. You could also get younger at that position through the draft. Center, I would like to see an upgrade at the center spot. So looking at, maybe you bring in somebody like Matt Paredes, who was a Panther of the past, who was with Ron Rivera, I believe. You could go that route, but you've got centers here. Let's check. There's a few quality ones. I don't think, because if they move on from Brandon Scherf, it wouldn't make sense for them to like spend money on Ryan Jensen. So somebody a little bit cheaper, like Ben Jones would be a little bit cheaper. Justin Britt. Ted Karras, who else? Brian Allen, I don't think is necessarily a fit. Bradley Bozeman would be a nice fit, I feel like. So those guys make sense to me at center if they want an upgrade there. And you've got your right tackle situation fine. I think the offensive line, it's not fantastic. It's not dominant, but it's solid. It's workable. You're going to lose your best player, but as long as you don't get terrible at right guard and you just maintain some semblance of average, you should be fine. The tight end position, you've locked up Logan Thomas, I believe, for the future, so that's good to go. Maybe you look to add a lower key tight end, as your number 2 tight end, but I think they're fine at tight end. It's really coming down to the quarterback position. And like I said, maintaining average, maintaining no weakness on the offensive line. That's really the big thing. You don't want a huge, massive weakness on the offensive line. That's when you become really bad. So maintain that average at offensive line. Quarterback, Taylor Heineke is not going to be the guy. Neither is Kyle Allen or Garrett Gilbert. So you're looking elsewhere. Quarterbacks that make sense for me for Washington. I don't think they're in the sweepstakes for like really a trade, but I do feel like somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo makes sense. I just don't think Kyle Shanahan wants to help Washington very much because he hates them. I'm just going to be honest. So the quarterback position could use an upgrade. Marcus Mariota in this team, in this situation, does make sense to me because Ron Rivera and this coaching staff has experience with Cam Newton and utilizing a running quarterback. That's a big element of Marcus Mariota. Mariota's also an accurate underneath passer. They could also bring in Teddy Bridgewater as a bridge transitional player. I don't think Jameis Winston is the perfect fit here. I think you're looking for somebody with accuracy, quick decision making, and underneath, just ability to get the ball out. You could go with Bridgewater, Mariota. I'm not sure if these are long-term solutions, but they're more so. That's why I think Jimmy's a great fit here. And I would maybe be willing to give like a third or second round pick for Jimmy. I don't think I'd be willing to give a first. It would be interesting to see Trubisky here. I don't think they're going to be able to get Minshew, although I feel like Minshew would be a great fit for the Washington Commanders at quarterback because he's on the Eagles. I just don't think that would work. And they could also draft somebody, but you might be willing to wait till next year to draft somebody, given that the draft this year just isn't that promising. But if somebody falls to you, you could go with a veteran in free agency, and you could draft somebody as well. You could try to address it in multiple ways. Running back position is good. They might want to keep J.D. McKissick, who's been good for them, but I really like Patterson, so I think he's a good backup. Obviously, Gibson is the starter. Defensively, no, I didn't. I didn't. I just, it's actually my grandpa's ring. So the defense, you've got Payne and Allen in the inside with Ioannidis. You could maybe move Ioannidis for a different player or a pick. Given that he's a very good player and probably more useful to another team in a bigger role, you could probably move him and get some assets back if you like. But Allen, Payne, and Ioannidis is a killer trio in the inside. Sweat, and obviously you've got, what's his name? Why am I forgetting his name? Chase Young. So you got Young and you got Sweat on the outside. Davis you drafted in the first round. You need to look to get faster at the opposite linebacker position. Their defense still utilizes a lot of linebackers, so it would make sense to get faster at that spot. I think that's been a weakness. Cole Holcomb and David Mayo, these guys have been kind of weaknesses for them the last couple of years. But Jamin Davis helps. He's athletic. He's pretty good. So they're fine there, but they need to get another linebacker in there. Somebody like in the Quan Alexander type of mold. Let me see. Who else? Gerard Davis, maybe. Somebody like that. Eric Wilson would be solid. Grugier Hill, maybe. Who else? Nothing too crazy, but like a nice number 2 linebacker. White from the Chargers, maybe. So then you go to the secondary, and the corner position is solid. William Jackson and Kendall Fuller at 2 of the 3 positions. You would like to have a better other perimeter corner. Darryl Roberts is a free agent who is a depth player. Bobby McCain at safety is a free agent. Troy Apke is also a free agent at safety. You have DJ Hayden on the roster. He's more of a backup nickel player. So looking for another perimeter presence on the outside. That's what I would be looking for. And safety. So I think you got rid of Landon Collins already, or you're set to get rid of him. Curl is pretty good, and Reeves isn't bad, but you would like to get better at the safety position. Now, typically this team, Ron Rivera and company, they've never really spent a ton of money on safety. They typically go with cheaper alternatives, cheaper options. You could go to the draft maybe to get an impact player, but there's a lot of free agents, safeties that you could probably get for cheap to upgrade that spot. And I think it's wise to move off of Landon Collins. He just paid too much money for his usage, and that type of safety isn't really valuable in the NFL any longer. The downhill in-box safety. So upgrading the coverage at the safety position would be huge. So honestly, Washington, a lot of it's going to come down to getting a better quarterback, but it's going to be tough to do that this year, just the way the landscape's looking. It's going to be tough to trade for one this year. and you're really looking towards the free agency for a bridge option, just an upgrade over Tyler Heineken, my guy. And then wide receiver, I think you're fine. Offensive line, you've got to maintain that average stability, get better in the back end of your defense, and get faster at linebacker. That's the way I see Washington. I think they're an okay roster right now, but they could definitely get better at a few spots. So that is the NFC East. All right, let's